I'll be recording so that if you want to listen to it again, or if you have to jump off early, you'll be able to listen in. So welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining. And thanks to Juan Lopez and Branham for offering this information to the senior parents. I'm assuming most of you on the call are senior parents. If there are some parents of younger students, that's totally fine. But most of the remarks will be geared towards and hopefully helpful for seniors. So I'm Steve Shapiro, certified financial planner, former CPA. Been helping parents reduce college costs for about 20 years now. Got started doing this when my own kids were in high school. So my main goal tonight is to spend about an hour with you sharing information about the financial planning process around college. My goal is for you to be much better informed when you leave than when you came. And that's important because the more informed you are, the better the chance that you'll make more informed decisions. And that's a good thing. Now, obviously, I can only cover so much in an hour. So I would encourage you to continue your research and your homework. Even though you have seniors, it's not too late. You can still learn and help yourself. I would suggest, if you're on Instagram, that you follow me on Instagram at Tuition Solutions Now. I've been posting a couple of times a week, trying to post helpful information. Also on my website, there's a resource tab and a lot of information out there. Suggested reading, websites, PDFs, links to other sites. So check out the resource tab on my website. And lastly, if you're not already subscribed to my e-newsletters, I would encourage you to do that. I send out messages periodically with information pertaining to college planning issues. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Pop your questions in the chat if you have them as I am speaking, and I will leave time at the end to answer questions. I'll stay longer than an hour if there are more questions, not a problem. So there are two keys to success when it comes to reducing college cost. One is to plan ahead, not leave the outcome to chance, not wing it. And the second is to take action, to not procrastinate, but to take action. And the fact that you are here tonight tells me that you are doing both of those things. You're trying to plan ahead, and you are taking action. So very good. Very good. So let's go ahead and get started. So, since you've made the time to be here, you're probably concerned about college costs, hoping to be better prepared, maybe a bit confused, not sure where to start. The next hour will help. It'll definitely answer some of your questions and hopefully relieve a little bit of your anxiety. So let's start by looking at college cost. Now that chart represents sticker prices. The total costs 1 year at these various types of institutions. CSU's top line, Cal State's, San Jose, San Francisco, Fresno, Long Beach, Chico. You can see by the bar chart, $30,000 a year. So that's everything: tuition fees, room and board, books, incidentals. $30,000 a year. That's a lot of money. Times 4, over $100,000. UC's roughly $40,000 a year. Berkeley is over 40, about $42,000 a year. Private colleges and universities, many of them are in the 85 to 90,000 range now. And lastly, out-of-state public flagship colleges, very important, pay attention to this, $55,000 to $60,000 per year. Examples of out-of-state public flagship colleges for California students: University of Oregon, University of Washington, University of Colorado, University of Michigan. If your child is applying to any of those schools, and a lot of kids in California apply to Oregon and Washington especially, you need to understand, parents, that it's very, very likely that the price tag is going to be $55,000 to $60,000. Many of us assume it's going to be about the same as a UC at $40,000. That is not the case. State colleges are supported by their own state. States do not typically support out-of-state students. It's the same with out-of-state students coming into California. They're also paying between $50,000 and $60,000 a year. So very important that you're aware of that. We're going to talk about financial aid basics, need-based and merit. Then we're going to talk about some strategies. So as I'm going along, please feel free to pop your questions in the chat. And by the way, let me go back to this for just a second. So remember, we're talking about sticker prices here. So this is the total cost of a year at these schools. A couple things to keep in mind. Number one, you see the privates are $80,000 to $90,000. Very important to understand, and I suspect many of you, especially if you have seniors, you know this. That's the sticker price. Very few families pay the sticker price. Some do, but most don't. 80 or 90% of the students attending these expensive colleges receive some amount of financial aid. Some receive a little, some receive a lot. In fact, one thing about college pricing, you may not realize it, but one thing that colleges have in common when it comes to their pricing with airlines and the San Francisco Giants is dynamic pricing. You know, you've all flown on airplanes. You know that the person sitting next to you probably didn't pay the same amount for their ticket that you did. Everybody on the airplane paid a different amount for their ticket. San Francisco Giants adjust their prices based on the demand. Well, private colleges and universities, they don't charge the same thing to all students. It varies quite a bit. So those three, that is something that the Giants, the airlines, and the private colleges have in common, is a form of dynamic pricing. So again, financial aid basics. So the first thing that we need to understand here is, hang on a second. Yep. Let's talk about financial aid. What is it? We need to understand what the definition is before we can start talking about more in-depth concepts. So here's what financial aid is. It's very simple. It's either grants, scholarships, loans, or work study. Any financial aid offer that your child might receive from the state government, the federal government, or the colleges themselves will be one of these four items. It's all there is. Grants and scholarships are free. They do not have to be paid back. That's what we want. We want as many grants and as many scholarships as possible. But in the college financial aid system, both loans and work study are considered options or components of financial aid. So if you hear colleges touting how generous they are with financial aid, that's fine, that's great, but you need to dig a little deeper and ask, okay, tell me more. The financial aid that you're talking about, how much is it? How much of that is free money, grants or scholarships, and how much is self-help or loans and work study? Some colleges claim that they are very generous with financial aid, when in fact a lot of the financial aid that they offer is loans, and that's absolutely not what we're looking for. But so keep in mind those four components of financial aid. Now, financial aid is awarded to students, and again, I'm sure most of you know this, based either on need or merit. And it's very important that you understand where your child falls in the system with respect to both need and merit. We're going to talk about that more as we go along. So the question is, and many of you may be asking yourself this, will your child qualify for need-based aid? Now, I suspect some of you are saying, well, you know, our income is pretty darn healthy and we've got assets, so I don't really think our kid's going to qualify for any financial aid. And many of you will be right, but you won't all be right. So let's go over it. Here's the formula that's used, again, by the federal government, the state government, as well as all of the colleges to determine whether or not your child qualifies for need-based aid. It starts with the cost of attendance. We've already talked a little bit about the cost of attendance. We know that a state university, Cal State, costs around $30,000. Cal Poly, I think, is 32 right now. UC's about 40, privates 80 to 90. Some of them, believe it or not, are now a little over $90,000 per year. So that's cost of attendance. That's where we start. From that, you subtract the Student Aid Index, or SAI. And in a minute, we're going to talk about SAI in more detail. What is it? Where does it come from? Because if you subtract the Student Aid Index from the cost of attendance, you get the number that indicates whether or not your child will qualify for need-based aid. So let's say, for example, that you're talking about a UC. Will your child qualify for financial aid, need-based aid at a UC? Cost 40. Let's say that your student's SAI is 25. 40 minus 25, your child qualifies for need-based aid. $15,000 worth. 40 minus 25. Does that mean that the UC will give your child $15,000? No, it does not. It means that a financial aid package totaling $15,000 will consist of one or more of the 4 items we discussed: grants, scholarship, loans, or work study. Most students, in the example that I'm giving you, a loan, at least a student loan of about $5,000 will be included in that $15,000. So this is the formula to determine, will your child qualify for need-based aid? So you can see, based on the formula, the key is, what the heck is this Student Aid Index? And by the way, if you've heard the expression expected family contribution, or EFC, that's the same thing. It's been renamed the Student Aid Index. There have been a lot of changes this year in the financial aid system and in the FAFSA. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And this is one of the changes. Expected family contribution has become Student Aid Index. Okay, so what is Student Aid Index? Where does it come from? Well, it's determined when your child files their FAFSA, free application for federal student aid, and if your child is going to be applying to one of 200 or 300 private colleges and universities, they require or request not just the FAFSA, but they also require or request a CSS profile. It's a second financial aid form that is much more detailed than the FAFSA. So when you fill out the FAFSA and the CSS profile, they ask you for parent income and student income, and parent and student assets. Now, important to note that if you have a senior, they're graduating in 2024, They look at the tax return 2 years prior to high school graduation. So seniors graduating 2024, they're going to look at your 2022 tax return. Then the next year, when your child is going to be going into their second year, they ask for the 2023 tax return, and the following year, 2024. So you typically refile it every year. And then on the assets, it's the value of the assets as of the date you file the FAFSA. So you might ask, okay, well, that's fine. What income do they look at? Typically, they look at adjusted gross income. Now, there are some adjustments to it up and down, but generally speaking, the starting point is adjusted gross income, not taxable income. Taxable income would be after deductions, after the standard deduction, or after deductions for medical, home mortgage interest, property taxes, charitable contributions, things like that. If they looked at the income after deductions, that would be taxable income, and that would be better, but they don't do that. They look at adjusted gross income. Now, what about assets? What assets do they count? Remember, what they're trying to get to is which of your assets can be expected to be used to pay for college. So think about it. If you have money in the bank, would you guess that money would be available to pay for college? Yes, of course. So money in the bank, cash, savings, checking, money in investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, equity in rental properties or investment properties. Yes, equity would count. Home equity, would they count the equity in your home as being available to pay for college? Thankfully, most colleges, the vast majority of colleges, do not count your home equity. They do count, for the first time this year, the value of your business. So if you're self-employed or own a business, starting this year on this FAFSA, they will count the value of your business. So there have been a lot of changes this year, and those are just some of them. Now, one other thing, they're going to count your assets, parent assets and student assets. Assets that are held in the parent's name are not really assessed that heavily against you for financial aid. However, assets in the student's name, that's a different story. They're assessed very heavily. So if all things being equal, it's much, in terms of potential financial aid, it is much better to have the assets in the parent's name than it is in the student's name. Now, let me clarify or expand that just a little bit. Many of you may have 529 accounts, 529 plan accounts for your kids, where you've been socking away money to help pay for college. That's great. A 529 plan, very important, a 529 plan is a parent asset. Parent asset, not a student asset. That's a very easy mistake to make. If you make that mistake, that will have a potentially very serious negative impact on financial aid. So for any of you that are holding a significant amount of student assets in your student's name, that might be something you might want to quickly look at, because if you file the FAFSA with a lot of assets in your student's name as opposed to the parent's name, that could have a significantly negative impact on financial aid. Now, I don't have time tonight to go into a lot of more details about exactly what that means, but for those of you that are in that situation, if you're wondering about it, you'll hear before I finish that everybody that attends a talk like this, I'm happy to offer a 30, 45-minute free visit, and you can ask me any questions you want. So income and assets are reported on the FAFSA and the CSS profile, and the CSS profile is much more detailed. Now, very important, and I suspect that, again, if since I'm thinking most, if not all of you on the call are seniors, you know that the FAFSA has been delayed until December. Normally, the FAFSA window opens October 1st. There have been many, many significant changes to the FAFSA this year. So many changes, in fact, that the Department of Education didn't have enough time to update all the systems. So it's been delayed until December. And there have been many small changes, many significant changes. Some of the changes are good, are favorable for lower income, lower middle income families. Many of the changes are not favorable to middle, upper middle, and upper income families. On October the 24th at 7 o'clock, I'm going to host another webinar just like this, and I'm going to go over the FAFSA changes, including, these are some of the things that have changed. The rules for divorced parents. There's a multiple student discount that's going away. This is not good. The rules have changed with regards to 401k deferrals, putting more money in your retirement accounts, child support, small business owners. As I mentioned, now you're going to need to declare the value of your business. The rules have changed. If any of you are fortunate enough to have parents, grandparents of the student who are planning to help out, the good news is the rules have changed for the better. And lastly, a lot of the information will be transferred automatically from the IRS website. That's good in many cases. It's very problematic in others. So that's going to be an important part of our conversation on October the 24th. Now, I'll leave this screen up for just a minute because the QR code that you see on the screen is actually one that will allow you to register for this webinar. So if you open up your phone and your camera, point it at the QR code, you should see a link pop up. You press on that link, it'll take you to the Zoom registration. You can register for that webinar. If you're on my mailing list and you get my emails, no doubt you'll get an email with the same information, so don't worry. And also, since this is being recorded, and I will provide the recording link to Juan Lopez, counselor at Branham. Any of you that want to download this and look at it again will be able to do so and access this code. But I encourage you, if you're not familiar with the changes of the FAFSA, to tune in on that webinar on the 24th. Now, I would strongly suggest that before you file the FAFSA, and even if you have a junior or a sophomore, that you calculate your child's student aid index ahead of time. Don't wait till the last minute. Calculate it now. There's two ways to do it. You can see the links on the screen. If you Google Big Future EFC Calculator, it'll take you to the College Board website. You don't have to register. You can do it anonymously. Answer the questions in the calculator. It will give you your student aid index. Also, it will give you the index for both the FAFSA schools and the CSS profile schools, both. So you'll get two numbers. The federal student aid estimator is just the FAFSA. So if you have time, do them both. The numbers should come out pretty close. But I will also warn you ahead of time. The picture that you see on the screen of the mom, the shock, with that shocked look on her face, that quite possibly will be the look on your face when you see the student aid index number. Many of you will look at that number in amazement, saying, this can't be. How can they expect us to pay that much? But unfortunately, unless you've made a mistake in entering the data, it's probably correct. it's definitely a disappointing number, but for many of you, when you see that number, it will be much higher than you think it should be, than is reasonable, and then you can afford. So just be prepared when you see that number. And again, if you have any questions about anything I've mentioned, just pop it in the chat. So we've talked about we've talked about need-based aid. Let's talk about merit aid. Then we're going to talk about some strategies, and then I'll be able to take your questions. So merit aid. Whereas need-based aid, as we've heard, is based upon the income and the assets of the family members, merit aid is awarded based on some talent or skill or something positive in the student's application or the student's background that the college likes very much, private colleges now, the college likes very much, they want the student to attend, and they're willing to offer merit aid to entice them to attend. So we know that it's awarded to students that they want to attract, but who do they offer it to? They offer it to the students that they want to attend because they feel that that student has something to offer that would be a benefit on their campus, to their school. Also, private colleges and universities use merit aid to build the class that they want. All colleges, public and private, are trying to achieve certain goals with their class, with their admissions. They want to achieve, on campus, they want a certain balance between STEM kids and liberal arts. They want a certain balance between males and females. They want a certain balance ethnically. So they're trying to build a class while still make their profit goals or their revenue goals. Many of the decisions that they make surrounding whether or not to accept or offer merit aid to a particular student has less to do with the student and more to do with the college's goals. So in the yellow, you can see that I've indicated that this is very important, not just for the parents to understand, but for the students to understand. The college acceptance process is not a meritocracy. And what I mean by that is you might think that the more qualified students are the ones who will be receiving acceptance letters and offers of significant merit aid offers. Now, of course, the high achieving students do receive acceptances and merit awards, but it's really, really important to realize that the most qualified students aren't always the ones admitted or receiving merit aid packages. And that's entirely because, as I mentioned earlier, these private colleges and universities are admitting students to satisfy their needs. And if that means that your child or any high achieving student doesn't fit into one of the boxes or categories that the college is trying to fill that year, the student may not be accepted. It is not because the student wasn't qualified. It's not because they couldn't do the work. It's not because they did anything wrong. It's simply because many colleges are overwhelmed with applications. They can't take everybody. And if your child does not get in to some of their favorite privates, it is not them. It's really important that they try to not take it personally. I get it's hard not to take it personally, but it really isn't. A lot of the outcome, as I've indicated there, is beyond the student's control. That's just the way it works. And it's important that you understand that. Now let's back up a second, go up here. Colleges do not want empty seats. Empty seats means lost revenue. What does that mean? How does that help you? In your searching for colleges that are a good fit for your child, if you can find colleges that are likely to have empty seats, those are the colleges that are more likely to offer acceptances and merit aid. And I'll come back to this point in the next slide. I mentioned earlier, colleges want diversity, all kinds of diversity. If your child happens to check off one of those diversity boxes for that college, that may be a good thing in terms of acceptance and merit aid. And I mentioned earlier that very few students pay the full price at these privates. It's really astounding, but the average tuition discount today is around 50%, which means that if your child applies wisely to private colleges and universities, there's no guarantee, but there's a pretty darn good chance that if they stack up well against the competition, because there is a lot of competition, they'll receive a significant tuition discount or merit scholarship, enough that in many cases, it brings the price down from 85 or 90 down to that UC range of 40 to 50. And this happens all the time. So it's 7 o'clock. We're about halfway through. That's good. And now the last few slides, we're going to talk about strategies and then take your questions. So let me just take a peek in the chat. Let's see here. Okay, let's see. I have a 529 plan. My daughter's name is on as beneficiary. Better to delete her name. No, absolutely not. You can't delete her name. It's a good question. Thank you. So it's a very good question. Let me clarify. 529 plans there's an owner and there's a beneficiary. Usually the owner is the parent. Sometimes it's a grandparent. Beneficiary is almost always the student. That's fine. That's exactly the way you want it. That is a parent asset. Don't worry about it. Don't change a thing. Thank you for the question. Okay, so that was the only question so far. So let's continue. Okay. We're going to talk about financial aid strategies, then we're going to talk about application strategies, and then some tax strategies. So, financial aid strategies. You need to understand whether or not your child will qualify for need-based aid. Sometimes you'll see it referred to as financial aid positioning. If your student will qualify for need-based aid, if you can, reduce the student aid index, if possible, by managing your income and your assets. If you remember the formula, the cost minus the student aid index is need-based aid. If you can reduce the student aid index, your child will qualify for more need-based aid. How do you do that? When it comes to income, remember, seniors, we're talking about 2022, you can't alter the past. Juniors, they're going to look at 2023, that's this year. Sophomores are going to look at 2024. So what can you do to alter your income this year, 2023? Well, if you work for a large company and you get a W-2, there may not be much you can do other than if you can max out your 401k contribution, really have a lot of money deferred into retirement, that will this year for the first time reduce your SAI. So that's a good thing. Put more money into retirement, 401k, 403b. Also, if you are if your child might qualify for need-based aid and they're a junior and 2023 is the important year, try not to take unnecessary income. Don't sell appreciated stock. Don't sell a rental property and take a big gain. Now, sometimes you have to do these things because for other reasons, for non-college planning reasons, and that's fine. If you have to do it, you have to do it. But if you have a choice and you can avoid taking excessive income, then that would help keep your SAI down. As far as assets, remember, assets are reported on the date you file the FAFSA. So if your child is in a position to qualify for need-based aid, then it's possible that you may be able to reposition some assets, take some money out of the bank, or take some money out of investments, do something else with them so that they don't appear on the FAFSA. Perfectly legal, perfectly legitimate, ethical, no problem. So qualify for need-based aid, try to reduce your student aid index. Some colleges are much more generous than others. So do your homework, try to determine which colleges are more generous, and if they fit what your child's looking for in a college, that's good, more generous financial aid. But what if your child will not qualify for need-based aid? Then you need to focus on colleges that award merit aid, not need-based aid, but merit aid, because some colleges award need-based aid, some award both. Now, remember, we're talking financial aid strategies. If you're in a divorce situation, only one of the parents' information appears on the FAFSA, not both, only one. You get to choose. Now, the rules are changing this year on which parent appears on the FAFSA. This is one of the changes that I'll talk about in that webinar on the FAFSA. And this one's going to be messy because the rule now says, going forward, that the parent that appears on the FAFSA with the child is the one who provides the majority of the support for the child. That's not the rule that was in place for many years up until this point. The prior rule was the parent who appeared on the FAFSA was the one with whom the student lived most of the time. Well, that's a lot different. So there may be a little bit of controversy or disagreement over which parent needs to go on the FAFSA. But that's the rule, and you're going to have to make a decision between parents as to which parent appears on the FAFSA. It's not necessarily black and white, and it may be a bit of a contentious conversation, but that's the rule. So let me give you an example of why this is so important. We're talking about student aid index numbers. Let's take a relatively modest student aid index number of 20,000. Remember the formula. Cost minus SAI is need. 40 minus 20. This student qualifies for $20,000 of need-based aid. Let's say this is a UC. So parents, can you then assume that because your child qualifies for $20,000 of need-based aid, that a UC will give you $20,000 of free money? Absolutely not. They will not. I guarantee they will not. At least $5,000 of this will be loans, probably more. So this UC is going to cost this student between, I'm guessing, $20,000 to $25,000. Now, what if the same student applies to an expensive school, $85,000, EFC or SAI of 30? Why did it go from 20 to 30? Many of these colleges, some of these colleges will count some of your home equity. So I just increased it $10,000 to allow for a little bit of home equity. 85 minus 30, $55,000. Your student now, instead of qualifying for $20,000 of need-based aid, they qualify for $55,000 of need-based aid. There are some 60 to 70 colleges in the United States that basically have a policy that says, if your student qualifies for need-based aid, we will provide 100%. 100%. Now, Some of those schools will require student loans, but let's ignore the student loan issue for a moment. If your child was accepted to this school and your EFC or SAI was 30, qualifying for 55,000 of financial aid, if this was 100% need-based met, 85,000 minus, 55,000 of need, some 60 schools in the United States will give your kid $55,000. Some of them will give 50, require a $5,000 loan. That's a very generous offer. The net cost here is in the 30 to 40 range. That's roughly a UC. This is how a family with modest means, how their student can qualify for a lot of financial aid. So the trick is, which schools are more generous? Some are more generous. That's part of your homework, is to try to determine, okay, how generous are the colleges that my kid is applying to? What does it look like? What might our cost be? Now, one more example. This was a low student aid index. This is really important. Let's talk about what happens if there's a high student aid index. Let's say the student aid index is 100, 115,000. Not that hard to get if you have a significant income, 300,000 or 400,000, and you have assets, you have a few $100,000 of assets. It's not hard to get to $100,000. Look at the public school. Will this student qualify for any need-based aid? Absolutely not, zero. How much are you paying? The whole thing, 40. Let's look over here. Private college, cost 85. Very high EFC. Is your student qualifying for any need-based aid? Zero, absolutely not. How much is this school going to cost? $85,000. So here's the problem. Every single year, many high-achieving students from affluent families with very high SAIs, they apply to colleges that only award need-based aid. They only award need-based aid. They don't give any merit aid. What are some examples of these colleges that are very generous with need-based aid, but not merit aid? Any of the Ivies, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, Brown, all those schools, very generous with need-based aid. They give no merit aid. So you have a high-achieving student, you have a high EFC or SAI, your child applies there, I guarantee you're going to pay full price. Very important to understand this, because every year students are accepted to top-notch colleges. Parents assume they're going to get scholarships because they're really good students, and they get nothing. And this is the reason. So be very careful. If you have a high SAI and you're concerned about the cost, you don't want to pay full price, look for privates that award merit aid. Very important. Those are financial strategies. Now, again, since I'm recording it and I'm going fast, you may want to listen to this again. You may want to reach out if you have questions. Application strategies. Take a look at the colleges that your kid's applying to. Try to determine the net cost while they're going through the application process. Don't wait. Know what your budget is and what you can afford. Now, to those of you that are, for whom the goal is to try to maximize merit aid potential, it's really important that the colleges to which your student applies, that they are in the top portion of the applicant pool when it comes to grades and test scores. And this information is all public. You can tell what's the midpoint of the incoming, last year's incoming class, GPA and test score. If you want to maximize your child's merit aid potential, they should be in the top portion of the applicant pool, not the middle, and certainly not the bottom portion of the applicant pool. Now, I mentioned this earlier. This is an application strategy, and it does work. If you want to reduce the cost of college, it will help if you can identify colleges that will be more likely to have empty seats, because they are more generous with merit aid. Why? Because they have to be. It's very competitive. These private colleges are competing for the students. That's why the average discount rate is over 50%. Now, are all colleges generous with their merit aid? No, I mentioned earlier, some colleges don't even offer merit aid. Other colleges do, but they're not very generous. So again, it's part of your homework to try to determine which ones or to what degree they are generous. Now, really important to understand what I have in parentheses, and I mentioned it earlier. The colleges that are more likely to have empty seats, the ones that are more likely to be generous, are typically smaller, not highly selective, not highly ranked, and off the beaten path. So you're thinking, okay, well, if they're not highly selective or highly ranked, then they're not very good, are they? Yes, a lot of these colleges are excellent. Some would say actually they are superior to the highly selective colleges because you have smaller class sizes, direct contact with the professor instead of the TAs. So, but for our purposes today, as a financial planner, giving you ideas for how your child might achieve better results for merit aid, take a look at colleges that might be smaller, not highly selective, ranked, or off the beaten path. Think about where most of our kids are applying. Most of our kids are applying to the same colleges, the UCs, understandable. Many of the privates have many times more applications than they can accommodate. So it's largely supply and demand. With that many students applying, the highly selective schools do not have to be generous because they're going to fill their seats regardless. But all the rest of the schools, they're competing for students, and they will offer merit aid to the students they want. Remember, it's much better to have somebody in the seat, a student in the seat, even if they're only paying half, than having an empty seat. Now, if you're wondering, okay, so what are some examples of these smaller colleges? You should pick up a book called I'm blanking on the name. It'll come to me. Colleges that save lives. Colleges that. Somebody help me out if you know the name of this book. Lauren Pope. Colleges that. It'll come to me. In any case.
Colleges that change lives.
It is colleges that change lives. Thank you very much, Guam. Yeah, I thought about it and I thought that doesn't sound right. Colleges that change lives. You can get it at the library. You can buy it for $25. Talks about 40 or 45 schools spread around the United States, small private liberal arts schools that typically are quite generous with merit aid because they have to compete. Okay. Sometimes you have requirements that are optional. The obvious one that comes to mind is test scores. Many colleges aren't taking test scores anymore. Some are optional. If your child has taken the SAT or the ACT and they've achieved good scores, submit them. There's quite possibly an advantage to acceptance if you have good test scores and you submit them. Now, I mentioned earlier that out-of-state flagship colleges are very expensive. If your child is hoping to go out of state, take a look at the Western Undergraduate Exchange Schools. There's a website for it. If you Google it, you'll find it easily. Western Undergraduate Exchange consists of colleges in the Western states that have agreed to keep a lid on tuition. So it's quite possible that your child can attend an out-of-state public college for about the same cost as a CSU. Now, keep in mind, it doesn't apply to, it's not every college and it's not every major. So check out the website, call the school if you need more information. And lastly, for seniors, especially, not so much for juniors at this point, although I would say juniors it can take advantage of this as well. Colleges consider many factors when they consider whether or not to admit a student: grades, test scores, extracurricular activities, the essay, etc. One of the factors that many colleges consider is called demonstrated interest, and it's just what it says. The college wants to know, has this child shown or demonstrated any interest in our school? Well, what does that mean? Have they visited? Has they visited the campus and registered? Do we know that they've been here? Have they visited the website? Have they visited various departments on the website? What websites have they visited? How long were they on the websites? Have they sent any emails? Have they corresponded with anybody in a department at the university? Are they on our email list? Are we sending them emails? Are they opening the emails? With big data being what it is today, colleges are very sophisticated. They know all of this stuff, and if they're looking at a couple of students and one has demonstrated a lot of interest, indicating they're very serious about the school, and another student has demonstrated very little interest, that could make a difference between which of those students gets accepted. So there are today's talk was 1 hour. I've given talks as long as an hour and a half, even 2 hours, where I go into a lot more strategies, including tax strategies and strategies for small business owners. Since I'm stopping to take questions and we're at 7:25, those of you that have questions about your taxes, tax strategies, if you own a small business, or if you are interested in those types of strategies, absolutely, I'm happy to help. Just schedule one of the free consultations. So what I want to emphasize is our main takeaway today is taking action. Hope and prayer is fine, but action is what'll get it done. Get your head out of the sand, take action. Now, parents, this is your homework, and we talked about most of this. Continue saving if you can. Don't leave the outcome to chance. It's like any game or sport. You have to know the rules. Now, there are rules when it comes to college planning. If you don't know the rules, you're at a disadvantage. Calculate your child's student aid index. Every college is required to have a net price calculator on its website. So for every college that your child is applying, I would encourage you to visit the net price calculator at each college, fill out the calculator, see what it says you're expected to pay. Take it with a grain of salt. It's a tool, that's all. It's just a tool, but do that, do the SAI calculator. Choose colleges wisely. Some are more generous than others. Very important, the next 2 points. Look at your budget. Determine what you can afford to pay. Talk with your child about your budget. In my opinion, as a financial planner, it's important that you set expectations with your kids so they understand that there is a limit to what you can afford. If you don't have the conversation, they may not know that. They may just assume that you're going to be able to pay whatever it takes. Many parents say this to their kids: apply where you want, we'll worry about the money later. I understand. You want to do whatever you can for your kids. You don't want to disappoint your kids. The problem is, if you take that approach, you may find out in the spring at acceptance time that they're accepted to a very expensive college that you can't afford, and then you're going to have to tell them no. That's a very, very difficult conversation. In my opinion, it's better to talk about your budget now, set expectations with your kids so they understand that if a college comes in way above your budget, it may not be doable. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to take questions in just a minute. Before I get to that, I offer everybody a 30-45-minute free session. If you use that QR code and book a session, I'll answer whatever questions I can. I'll refer you if I can't. I'll go over many other strategies, including ways you can deduct part of the cost if you're a small business owner. I have a handout called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly about private scholarships. I'll be happy to share that with you. And I'll share other information as is specific for your needs. So it's really free. There's no obligation. There's no hitch. There's no hitch. I encourage you, everybody, to take advantage of the 45-minute consultation. Obviously, this year it's pretty busy. So take a look at the calendar. That QR code is my calendar, and you can book your own appointment. Okay. So while we're doing that, well, I'll leave that up. Let me take a look at the questions. Okay, let's see. Quack says, does it make sense for us to apply for financial? EFC is really high above sticker price. This is because we've been hearing that everyone should apply for financial aid to get discount minimum. Okay, so yeah, that's a really good question. And you touched on, I would say, one of the main reasons, Quack, why I would encourage, with very few exceptions, everybody to apply. And here it is, and you touched on it. Colleges like families with money. There's, they may deny it, but in private colleges in particular, they like families with money. If you fill out the FAFSA and the CSS profile, yeah, it's a pain in the ass. I completely agree. But it may make a difference with some schools because they like affluent families. It could tip the scales, so it could make a difference. That is one legitimate reason for filing. There may be others, but that's the main one. It's better to have one or two under beneficiaries on 529 plans. It's one 529 plan, one owner, one beneficiary. So if there's two kids, there's typically separate plans. How do you know which colleges will have empty seats? Not sure if the information is public. Oh, you have to kind of, Victoria, good question, but as I kind of alluded, you have to kind of back into it by looking at which colleges are highly selective because they don't have empty seats. So really, most colleges have empty seats, but for the top, the most highly selective colleges, most of the rest have empty seats. But the ones that are particularly generous, that have empty seats and they're generous, are the ones that I mentioned. They're smaller, they're private liberal arts schools. They tend to be off the coasts. There's a handful in Oregon, there's a handful in Washington. There are a handful on the East Coast, but there's a ton of them in between the coasts, in the states in between the coasts. So the answer is yes. The information is available if you look in the right places. And again, for those of you that scheduled the free consultation, I'm happy to say more. Okay, my question is targeted towards discount schools, not with the no merit schools, because it's really troublesome. You can't separate the discount schools from the. I'm not sure I understand your question, Quack. My question is targeted towards discount schools, not no merit aid. So no merit aid means need-based only. And the discount schools, those are the ones that offer merit aid. So I've mentioned the resource tab on my website. If you go to that tab and go to the sub-tab that says helpful websites, there are 2 or 3 links that I've given you that will help you in a few minutes determine which colleges are most generous with merit aid, which colleges are most generous with need-based aid. So visit the website resource tab, look there. If you're having trouble, schedule your free visit, and I'll go over it with you. Oh, let's see. Do I need to input 401k? No. Retirement accounts are not reported on the FAFSA. Now, keep in mind the CSS profile, which again is required by some 200 or 300 private colleges and universities. It's much more detailed. They ask a lot of questions. You'll be amazed at the amount of detail that they ask. They do ask about retirement accounts. Some of them even ask what kind of cars you drive. It's just crazy. But no, retirement accounts are not counted against you in the financial aid formula. Hang on a second. Oops. All right, there's my contact information. All right, let's see. I lost the questions. Okay, looks like we answered all the questions. It's about 7:32. Wow, how about that? Finished kind of on time. Any last questions? If you want to unmute yourself and ask or pop it in the chat, I'll wait a minute. While we're waiting, if there aren't any other questions, again, I thank you for attending. Pat yourselves on the back for making time to attend. I hope you felt that this information was beneficial. Again, I do these webinars this time of the year, especially all the time, a couple of months. So I would encourage you to go to my website. Link is, the name is right there. If you're not already receiving my newsletters, sign up for them. They're free. I don't share your information with anybody. I'll keep you updated on new events and webinars. So I would encourage you to do that. Looks like there aren't any other questions.
Stephen, may I ask a question?
Of course.
So while you were talking, I went through the EFC calculator that you suggested. And there's a big discrepancy between the federal method and institutional method.
Yeah.
Expected parental contribution. I'm wondering where that stems from.
In most cases, it's because you indicated that you have some home equity. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah.
So the primary difference between the federal method, FAFSA, and the institutional method, CSS profile, is the formula that you filled out considers 100% of your home equity as being available to pay for college. So
wow. Okay, so they expect people to potentially refinance their mortgage in order to pay college.
Right. Now, remember, Topaz, that very few colleges use that formula. There's only a handful of colleges in the country that count 100% of your home equity.
Okay.
Many of these.
Do you happen to know if the University of Arizona or Arizona State are amongst those? Because I know they both accept the CSS.
No, those are public colleges. They don't count your home equity.
Okay, they were on the CSS list. That's why I was wondering.
Oh, I'm surprised. I didn't know that. I'm surprised they're on the CSS list. There may be other reasons for that. There are a few publics on there. I know Michigan is on there. I didn't realize that Arizona was.
Both U of A and Arizona State.
Okay. Yeah, hadn't heard that. I'm surprised. But they don't count home equity. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
So
then it should be closer to the federal.
It will be closer to the federal. Most schools will not count your home equity at all. Of the ones that do, they will limit it to 1 or 2 times your annual income. So if your income is, let's say your income's $100,000 and you have $1 million in home equity, some of them may count part of it, like 1 times your income, $100,000, 2 times your income, $200,000. But very few colleges count all of it. But good question. That is the difference between those 2 numbers. Thanks. Good question.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody. Any last questions? Unmute yourself if you do. Okay, wonderful. Thank you again for attending. I wish you all the best. Stay in touch if I can help, and best wishes going forward. Take care, everybody. Good night now.